In this video, we are going to understand higher order function, callback function in terms of execution context. So we'll go ahead and try to execute this piece of code in the way that JavaScript engine does. So as soon as JavaScript engine will read this code, the first thing it will do is to create a global execution context, which will contain memory. And the first thing it does, it will be in the declaration phase. So it will be in declaration phase. And in declaration phase, all we look for is function or variable declaration. So here on line number 1, we can see a function declaration called myMap. So we can go ahead and create a memory allocation with the name myMap. And the value of myMap is going to be a function, because that is what we have learned, the difference between variable and function declaration in declaration phase. So myMap knows that it is a function, and it will skip line number 2 to line number 7, moving on to line number 9. What do we find here? We find another function declaration known as double. And this is also a function declaration, so we'll say it's a function. It will skip line number 10 and 11, moving on to line number 13, where we see that we have a variable declaration called ARR. Another thing to notice is it is also defined using let keyword. And if you remember, what does let keyword does? It only creates the box, or you can think about creates the allocation. So I'll go ahead and create another variable name called ARR. What is the value? Right now nothing, because let doesn't initialize the variable with a value. So ARR is nothing right now. Moving on to line number 15, where we can see that we have another variable declaration using the keyword let known as double. Sorry, let's change the name because we are colliding the name. So we'll say double ARR. So here on line number 15, we have another variable declaration using let keyword called double ARR. So we'll go ahead and create. What is the value inside double ARR? Right now in declaration mode, nothing, because let doesn't initialize the value. So as soon as we reach line number 15, there is nothing after that. So declaration phase will be done. And we'll move on to the next phase, that is execution phase. In execution phase, on line number 1, what do we see? It's a function declaration. In execution phase, this will be skipped. The same will happen with double function. Moving on to line number 13, here we see the execution where we are assigning a value of array inside ARR. So ARR will be assigned an array. And you also know that array is copy by reference, so it will be created somewhere. But right now, just for simplicity, I'm just creating it right here by saying 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So ARR is an array with a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Moving on to line number 15, we can see we have another value assigned to double array, and that value is coming out from myMap function. And what is the first thing that happens when you call a function? A function execution context will be created. So we'll go ahead and create a function execution context. So a function execution context will be created inside the execution part. This is the function execution context for myMap function. So we'll say function execution context of myMap. It will also have a part called memory. And as soon as you execute a function, the first thing it will do is to execute it in declaration mode. In declaration mode, I'm looking for any kind of declaration here. Can we see any declaration? So the first thing to notice is every arguments are also considered to be a declaration. We'll create a variable named array and callback. It can be assigned with a value, undefined or not. We don't have to think about it. So right now we have array callback. Moving on to line number 2, we see another variable declaration, and here it is using let. So I'll go ahead and create another variable that is final. What is the value? Nothing, because it is in declaration mode right now. Later on, do we see any other declaration? Not at all. It's a for loop. That's a statement. So declaration mode is over. So now we'll move on to the next phase, that is execution phase. So here in execution phase, the first thing that will happen is we are passing ARR as the value of array. So we'll say ARR. So we'll say array is equal to ARR. Moving on, what is the value we are passing on the place of CB? So CB is the placeholder. We are passing double function as a reference to CB. So we'll say CB is equal to double. We know what double is, right? We can see it here. This is double. Moving on to next line is let final is equal to empty array. So we'll assign a value of empty array. So we'll assign a value of empty array to final variable. So I created an empty array here. Now let's see what will happen. We are executing this piece of code, so it will keep executing. So here, right now the value of I is 0, I is less than array.length. So what is array.length? So we'll come here and we'll say array is ARR. What is the length of ARR? It is 5. So it will become I is less than 5. And we just have to do I++ each time. The first thing we are doing is defining another variable here that is known as element. And the value of element is array of I. So what will be the array of I for the first time? It will be 1. So the value of element will be 1. Here we are saying final.push, and what we are pushing inside that? We are pushing whatever being returned from here. So obviously for each case here, a function execution context will be created. So we'll create a function execution context, and this function execution context will be passed the value element. And what is the value of element? 1. And that 1 will be passed inside which function? What is CB here? So if we look at what is CB, so I'm looking for CB. So I'll go into our memory, and here we can see what is CB. So CB is double function, and double is a function that is right here. So double accepts a num and returns the double of that. So what will it return? So we have the value 1. It will return 1 multiplied by 2, that is 2. So 2 will get returned from this function, and that will be pushed inside the final array here. So 2 will be stored here. And as soon as that will happen, so the execution context will be deleted here, and we'll move on. For the same thing, it will keep happening again and again. So let's see, the value of I will change from 0 to 1 now. Now we'll check 1 is less than 5, that is true. So I'll go ahead and access the next element, that is 2. Element is 2. That will be passed inside the function and we'll get 4. Similarly, I will become 2 here. 2 is less than 5 and we'll get the next value, that is 3. So it is 3 now. So 3 returned from here will become 6, and going on it will become 8 and 10. And at last, what we are doing from here, we are not returning anything. But what if I go ahead and return final? So final will be returned from here. What is final? So we can see, so final is this array, and that will be returned, and that will be stored inside which variable? It will be inside double array. So now the value of double array will become a new array with the value 2, 4, 6, 8 and 10. So here in this case, what happened? myMap is a higher order function, and you can see that higher order function is a function that accepts a callback function as a parameter, and here we are passing double as a callback function. So double is the callback function and myMap is the higher order function. So the value passed here will always be pass by reference, because both array and double is a non-primitive value, because array is an object and function is also a first class object. So both are object. An object is a non-primitive, so it will be passed by reference. So reference will be passed, and this is what we'll get in final. And at last, what will happen? As soon as that got returned to a double array, the execution context of myMap will be deleted. What we have left is this global memory where we have myMap is a function, double is a function, array is a value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and double array is the value 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So in this way, we learned about how does a callback function and a higher order function behaves when it comes to execution context.